Hey everyone, welcome to Mountain Beast Mysteries. Today we're going to be talking about a very interesting Bigfoot encounter that was first reported back in October of 1870. This is one of the oldest Bigfoot encounters on record, and it's known as the Wildman of Crow Canyon. Very interesting story. Before we get into that, I would like to say that the Bigfoot Quest for the Wildman GoFundMe campaign is still live. If you're looking at making a donation to that film series, the link is down below in the description. Now, there's a few encounters that happened back in the 1800s, and one of the most popular ones that we've talked about on the channel is the one that happened in 1895 and was documented by Theodore Roosevelt in his book The Wilderness Hunter, which tells the tale of a hunter and a trapper named Bowman. And him and his friend were out hunting and trapping, and the friend was actually killed by one of these Bigfoot creatures. But this encounter happened prior to that. It actually happened in 1869, but it didn't come to light until 1870, when an anonymous person wrote in to a newspaper called the Antioch Ledger. So what I'm going to do for you guys is actually read the letter that was published in the paper back on October 22nd, 1870. I saw in your paper a short time since an item concerning the gorilla, which was said to have been seen in Crow Canyon and shortly after in the mountains at the head of Orostimba Creek. You sneered at the idea of there being any such critters in these hills, and were I not better informed, I should sneer too, or else conclude that one of your recent prospecting party had got lost in the wilderness, and didn't have any sense enough to find his way back to Terry's. I positively assure you that this gorilla, or wild man, or whatever you choose to call it, is no myth. I know that it exists, and that there are at least two of them, having seen them both at once not a year ago. Their existence has been reported at times for the past 20 years, and I've heard it said that in the early days an orangutan escaped from a ship on the south coast. But the creature that I have seen is not that animal, and if it is, where did he get his mate? Last fall I was hunting in the mountains about 20 miles south of here, and camped 5 or 6 days in one place as I have done every season for the past 15 years. Several times I returned to my camp after a hunt and saw that the ashes and charred sticks from the fireplace had been scattered about. An old hunter notices such things and very soon gets curious to know the cause. Although my bedding and traps and little stores were not disturbed that I could see, I was anxious to learn what or who it was that was so regularly visiting my camp, for clearly the half-burnt sticks and cinders could not scatter themselves about. I saw no tracks near the camp, as the hard ground covered with dry leaves would show none. So I started on a circle around the place, and 300 yards off in the damp sand I struck the tracks of a man's feet, as I supposed bare and of immense size. Now I was curious, sure, and resolved to lay for this barefooted visitor. I accordingly took a position on a hillside some 60 or 70 yards from the fire, and securely hid in the brush. I waited and watched. 2 hours or more I sat there, and wondered if the owner of the bare feet would come again, and whether he imagined what an interest he'd created in my inquiring mind, and finally, what possessed him to be prowling about there with no shoes on. The fireplace was on my right, and the spot where I saw the tracks was on my left, hid by bushes. It was in this direction that my attention was mostly directed, thinking the visitor would appear there, and besides, it was easier to sit and face that way. Suddenly I was startled by a shrill whistle, such as boys produce with 2 fingers under their tongue, and turning quickly I yelled, "Good God!" as I saw the object of my solicitude standing beside my fire, erect and looking suspiciously around. It was in the image of a man, but it could not have been human. I was never so benumbed with astonishment before. The creature, whatever it was, stood fully 5 feet high and disproportionately broad and square at the shoulders, with arms of great length. The legs were very short and the body long. The head was small compared with the rest of the creature, and appeared to be set upon his shoulders without a neck. The whole creature was covered in dark brown and cinnamon-colored hair, quite long on some parts. As I looked, he threw his head back and whistled again, and then stopped and grabbed a stick from the fire. This he swung round and round until the fire on the end had gone out, when he repeated the maneuver. I was dumb, almost, and could only look. 15 minutes I sat and watched him, as he whistled and scattered my fire about. I could have easily put a bullet in his head, but why should I kill him? Having amused himself apparently all he desired with my fire, he started to go, and having gone a short distance he returned, and was joined by another, a female unmistakably. When they both turned and walked past me, within 20 yards of where I sat, and disappeared into the brush, I could not have had a better opportunity for observing them, as they were unconscious of my presence. Their only objective in visiting my camp seemed to be to amuse themselves with swinging lighted sticks around. I have told this story many times since then, and it has often raised an incredulous smile, but I have met one person who has seen the mysterious creatures, and a dozen who have come across their tracks. The above is strictly correct. Yours truly, an old hunter. So what do you guys think about this Bigfoot encounter? I think it's very interesting. What's different than a lot of them is that these creatures are only about 5 feet tall, meaning if they are Sasquatch creatures, they're probably juveniles. If they're not Sasquatch creatures, then what else could they be? Like a chimpanzee or something like that? They have short legs and long arms? Who knows? Not every Sasquatch is going to be 7 feet tall, 8 feet tall, there's going to be smaller ones. They're not born as a full-size creature. They're born as a small baby, and then they grow into an adult. So these could very well be 2 juvenile Sasquatch. Kind of like in the Alberta encounter. There's 2 adults and then there's 2 juveniles, 1 male and 1 female. It could be something along those lines. The one interesting thing about this encounter is the location. It's not really a very forested area. It's in California, but it's not the same kind of environment as like the Bluff Creek area. The vegetation in this area is very sparse, and it's very desert-like. So that's another interesting detail, is these things are more out in the open, and there isn't as many places to hide. It is really interesting to hear these stories, though, that come from a time before the Patterson footage and before, the name Bigfoot was a thing. There's so many reports of, strange, upright, walking creatures that leave man-like footprints in the ground. And they happen all over the place, not just in California and in the States, but in Canada as well. There's the reports of David Thompson and him finding tracks in the Jasper area here in Alberta. Lots of footprints were discovered and documented, and you got these stories of actual visual sightings. This is one of those stories that you don't hear much about, and I didn't actually hear about it until recently. I read about it in an old magazine, a special Bigfoot edition of Newsweek. It's pretty much impossible to confirm if this story is true, but it is very interesting nonetheless. I would like to know what you guys think about it in the comments down below. The Bigfoot Quest for the Wildman documentary series GoFundMe page is still live. If you want to donate to that and help bring that project to life, you can check out the link down below. You can also check out the Spreadshirt t-shirt shop if you want to get some merchandise and help the channel out that way. That's another great way to do that. That's all I have for this episode of Mountain Beast Mysteries. We'll see you next time.